answer, according to a large majority of Americans questioned in a poll taken a year ago by the Pew Center for Religion and Public Life, is that anyone, any good person who is an adherent of any religion gets into heaven. Good news! You don't have to profess belief in a personal Savior or even be a Christian. According to this poll, 70% of Americans believe that good people from religions other than theirs get into heaven. Well, according to New York Times columnist Charles Blow, this news threw evangelicals into a tizzy. After all, the Bible makes it clear that heaven is a velvet-roped VIP area reserved for Christians, he wrote. It must be they asked the question wrong, these conservative Christians protested. So Pew asked again, asked another way, nearly the same result. Except this time, Pew asked people to specify which religions qualified people for heaven, and folks said, essentially, all of them. All of them. Well, when I read this, I was transported back to the time I was living in Tokyo, and one of my southern cousins came to visit. I took her where I took all my tourist friends in those years, to the great Buddhist temples of Joji. We passed under the temple gate and saw hundreds of people moving to and fro, lighting incense, pulling the rope to ring the bell to summon the gods, washing their hands before entering the holy place. My cousin gasped and turned to me with a conflicted expression on her face. "Oh, Mary," she said, "I just can't believe that all these people are going to hell." Well, there it was, the teachings of her religion colliding with the truth she was sensing deep in her belly. What kind of God would send these people to eternal torment, my cousin must have been wondering, just because they happened to have been born in a land where good people practiced one religion and not another. And to take it a step farther than my cousin probably did, what kind of people believe this? How does such a belief shape the way they live their lives? Well, I guess if you believe that being ethical is a ticket to heaven, you have a strong incentive to behave ethically. But I wonder what it does to the heart to believe that others will ultimately be excluded from grace, to believe in a God that excludes. It's an interesting question, but the one that I find actually a lot more interesting is looking at it from the other side, from our side. How do we live our faith of universalism? What is happening in our hearts? As early as the 3rd century in the Common Era, the Egyptian thinker Origen articulated a belief that Jesus came to earth to save everybody. In time, this became a Christian heresy, but it was one that had deep roots in the practice of the earliest Christians, who believed that that Jesus taught that love was the way to achieve heaven here on earth. This view gained traction in the soil of the New World, where 19th century universalists like Hosea Ballou preached a love powerful enough to create paradise in the here and now, a paradise that welcomes everyone with nobody left out. This is our heritage as Unitarian Universalists, and I wonder, do we live up to it? Around the world, people this week marked the 140th birthday of Mohandas Gandhi, who said, "It is easy enough to be friendly to one's friends, but to befriend the one who regards himself as your enemy, that is the quintessence of true religion. The other is mere business." A true universalist, Gandhi, also said, "I consider myself a Hindu, Christian, Muslim, Jew, Buddhist, and Confucian." Well, today is the feast day of St. Francis, who in the 13th century was trying to live the message of Jesus by hanging out with poor people and lepers, and by creating communities of itinerant monks who lived on faith that God would provide. He taught a hospitality so radical, so inclusive, that it transcended the bounds of the human species. And that is why we do pet blessings at the Feast of St. Francis. And Reverend Linda is going to be doing one at the church here at 4 o'clock, so bring your pets for a blessing. Stories have come to us that when Francis preached, people didn't always listen, but the birds did. As if Francis had access somehow to the way it might have been in Eden, before the apple and the fig leaf separated humankind from the rest of creation. What's more, according to legend, he tamed a hungry beast and taught the people of Gubbio to welcome the wolf to their door, as we saw in our play this morning. Francis and his brother monks also broke the conventions of the day by meeting people in the streets and the towns where they lived, instead of cultivating a separated Christian culture inside the walls of a monastery, the way most religious orders in Europe did at that time. Like most human beings, he was a bundle of contradictions. He preached peace and yet supported the Crusades. At least he did until he saw the violence of the Crusaders at close hand, and it sickened him. His romantic foray into the Crusades was motivated by a sincere wish to convert Muslims to Christ. And though we see the cultural imperialism in that now, even in the midst of war, the Muslim Sultan, Al-Malik al-Kamil, received him warmly in his court, recognized him as a holy man, and ordered his soldiers to grant him safe passage. Most importantly, Francis preached a relational faith that saw God as an infinitely large and welcoming space for all. During his lifetime, his order drew 5,000 followers during his lifetime, but many of them were utterly unequipped to practice the radical poverty that Francis and his closest brothers continued to live. Francis made room for them all, even though their presence changed his movement.